All right. Welcome, everybody. It's the Konflux community call. Today is August 26th. I'll put the agenda inside, but for those watching the recording, it's in the usual place. You should be able to find it associated with the video. We've got a couple topics up today. I think 5 by my current count. Maybe another will be added before end of the meeting, but if you have anything you want to talk about, as always, just add it to the agenda. You can even do it during the call. Doing it ahead of time is best because then everybody has a chance to kind of think about what the topic might be before we get here, and that always makes for a more productive discussion. Adam, you're up first with 2 topics. The first on the minimum conflicts. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah. So this came up in the ADR 50 where we're talking about adding kubearchive, and the thrust of the ADR discussion was around the necessary dependencies for that, which is deploying Knative serving and having a choosing a broker for that, which we're leaning, or at least I've been advocating for Kafka, and I think there's others too who've been advocating for Kafka as the default. But Gall brought up a good comment about, like, where does this thing go? And should we be putting these configurations in the Konflux CI repo? Because just looking at the state of that, it's kind of the intent is it's more of the sort of minimum Konflux. And I guess the question that I kind of had is, like, first off, have we even written down what is the minimum Konflux? Because I think that also came up in Brian's ADR around GitOps. And the second thing is, should that Konflux CI repo be just focused on that, or should we also be adding the kind of additional things that we have built there as effectively add-ons, additional components to bring in? Because we have other stuff in the Konflux CI GitHub org that aren't deployed in that definition, like the not multi-project, the multi-platform controllers, like one, at least off the top of my head. So kubearchive would be kind of this another thing where it's not maybe necessarily to get up and running on your laptop, but if you're going to operate it with some kind of level of production grade, production scale, this is a thing that you might need to solve these problems. So I don't know. I'd love to start the conversation about, like, how do we do this? How do we kind of make it so that we have a place to effectively define a deployment where you're able to add on these kind of additional production components? Or should we do this? Maybe we don't.
I'll raise my hand to go first. I just added a link into the doc just below your point to pull request 242 on the architecture repo, which was I proposed like a month ago and then got merged after just 3 weeks of review. And in it, I tried to describe in the overview document not describe, but like delineate what were the core components and what were the add-on, like some known add-on components there, where before they were all kind of mixed up in the doc. Like, I think a year ago, we started talking about the term core and the term add-ons to describe these 2 categories of things that were essential Konflux pieces and things that were like kind of optional, potentially additional pieces. But we never wrote down what core and add-ons were, and we never wrote down those words. So they were just like, for using conversation only. So that stuff just got written down last month. That's like half the problem, maybe even a quarter of the problem, is writing down what those things are. How we represent them in the Konflux CI repo or not is like another half or another quarter of the problem. Because like it'll just get complex, right? Like I think that repo currently aims to be only that minimum core set if we want to also include the add-ons, like do we include all of them? Do we include a way to optionally install a combination of them? Do we include like maybe like two configurations? Like there's a script to install the core set, and there's another script, to additionally install just some subset of the add-ons that we care to be in there as like an example for how things could be. I guess I don't know at the moment. As a user of Konflux, like image controller right now is in the add-on set. It's like not technically necessary. You don't really need Quay for things to work, but it's such a valuable piece of the Konflux onboarding experience. Like every time I demo it, I want to include and show that. So. Migla, go ahead.
Well, we might try to have a bare minimum for Konflux. It's one setup. We can have some recommended sort of setups that would include bare minimum plus all the comfortable stuff that user can just deploy it and use it without much of effort, like the easiest way to install, but still keeping it sort of minimal but comfortable, like a balance. And maybe full install, like with all the add-ons, probably not often used, and mostly to test if everything works together. And then users can tune components themselves, but then it's like their responsibility partially to, keep up all the dependencies, because I assume that there would be some dependencies between add-ons.
I think part of what's nice of having add-ons as a category is it's this open-ended thing where you can have an experimental project that you're not sure should be installed by default by anyone for any purpose, but you want to kind of be able to show that it could be integrated with Konflux in a certain way. And like Kube Archive early in its development was in that category, where no one would want to really use it because it didn't work yet back then. But you still would want to talk about it as like, you see how this would work as a Konflux add-on. What's our process for accepting new things as a new add-on? Is like a question I have, and I don't quite know the answer to. There's that open PR on the community repo now about the ADRs process, and I go back and read it. I think the language currently in that outstanding PR states that if you want something to be designated as an add-on, you don't need an ADR for it, with the intent being that we want the barrier of entry to that to be low, so that people could just talk about their like experimental add-on. But if we want to say like, well, if you get designated as an add-on, and that means you get to be included in a common installer in the Konflux CI repo, and that should have some sort of bar of review, right? So some bar of agreement that we can have a way to exclude new and unstable things.
So I'm wondering if like a potential solution here is we effectively, since the Konflux CI repo is like designed to be a GitOps repo, that we effectively create this sort of add-ons repo where sort of add-on components can be defined, and it might even be where even just like to minimize barrier to entry, like we can accept anything, just having the readmes indicating like kind of what relative level it is, whether someone's saying, hey, this is an experimental thing, versus, hey, someone can claim we've demoed this at scale, this is pretty stable, this is able to be used in this configuration. And then it would be up to effectively consumers to almost like pick and choose which ones they want to deploy. And maybe part of like the requirement for add-on is that, you know, whatever component you are defining, they have to be independent. They can't have a, well, and maybe we have to explore like what we mean by dependent, because we could have a chain of, oh, I could see something where this thing, like kubearchive is a good example where, oh, it depends on Knative eventing and the broker and whatnot. But also here's a configuration where we turn on CD events for Tecton. It starts broadcasting it, and it needs the Knative eventing broker to receive the events and so forth. So that's where things can get kind of interesting.
And Adam, you were suggesting maybe we put the add-ons in a different repo. What if we put them in just a different directory of the same repo to make it like easier for a consumer to browse the whole set?
And that might be also that was actually my initial thought, is like, let's keep it in Konflux CI, but just have effectively a directory structure that makes it clear that it's not the minimal.
Yeah, I like that.
Andrew has a good comment in chat about accepting anything as anything could compromise the build pipeline. So there might have to be add-ons may, I guess it would, to accept it, there's got to be some level of due diligence.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, more of a clarifying question for me. Is the uniqueness of like kubearchive or the scenario, is that because the reason we're saying, we don't need kubearchive for the core Konflux, because essentially, even though we have a need for some types of results database, that in essence, Konflux can just work with the default out-of-box Tecton results. So in a sense, saying, kubearchive should be the thing is kind of saying, not really, right? Like, because maybe you're not at the scale of that would need kubearchive and Tecton results. Is that kind of the contention we have here, or the odd uniqueness we have with kubearchive? Because like the image controller makes sense in terms of like, that's kind of a more like on and off. If you want this particular functionality, you can toggle that on. Same thing with multi-platform controller, but it's the uniqueness of kubearchive kind of feels like we have this core results concept that we depend on that's needed. And it's just, I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't know. I guess I'm just looking for that clarification. That's kind of what we're stuck on.
I only wanted to say that I wanted us to be cognizant of the time we spend on this topic, because there are a lot of other topics waiting.
I guess with that, maybe I'll say, Danny, I don't know the answer to your question, but like I think you can imagine running a Konflux instance without kubearchive, in which case you just have ephemeral results that go away and you lose them. And that's a very minimal thing that you probably wouldn't want to actually do in production. But I think like embedded in your question is that there's a reasonable argument to make that kubearchive should be treated as a core component. We have to debate and decide about what that is. We want to keep core as small as possible so that a default install or a minimal install can really be minimal. Everything that we add to that, quote unquote, bloats the core. And that's not a debate. I think we'd be open to seeing a discussion about it becoming a core thing in time, let's say.
Right. So I think for the sake of time, maybe if I just create a issue on the Konflux CI repo to continue this discussion on GitHub. Then we can move forward. Also, in the interest of time, my next topic can be skipped. That can be continued async.
Okay, that sounds good. With that, Andrew, are you ready to pick up on ARM64 support?
Yeah, I wanted to, well, I think I mentioned before that working on creating a blog post for Salsa in response to our requests for examples post that we put out. In doing that, I have a Mac, and so I want to be able to run this from my laptop using Konflux CI. And if we have external folks that are coming to Konflux, they might have Macs, and so ARM support is beneficial. And so I wanted to acknowledge all the work that the various teams did, and for Brian for helping to get the controllers to add ARM support. So Konflux CI deploys on ARM, but none of the pipelines actually can run. So what I've been doing is looking at the pipelines, looking at the images that are not supporting ARM and adding ARM support for them, as I have seen the ability to do. Some of these have already merged. Some of them have passed CI and are ready to merge. Others need other dependencies to merge first. Like App Studio Utils is a big dependency we have, but I need to have Conforma being built for ARM as well before doing that, because we copy the binary out of that image. So I just giving an update, showing some of the PRs that are open. If any of those are within your focus area, feel free to take a look at them. What I have not done, I see that Johnny's on the call. What I have not done is look to see if there's any issues for release pipelines. But part of what I want to do, of course, part of what I want to do for this example is also run some release pipelines. Not necessarily relevant for the tasks we have, but I might use, for example, the release utils image. But yeah, so I'll continue to iterate. App Studio Utils is blocked Clara and CI and Clam IV. Those need to have Konflux tests merge first, because I think they both depend on that. For Meadow, for that, I was planning on having the core services pipeline merge to support building multi-arch, so that we can easily change or pass a parameter to that pipeline to be able to build a multi-arch. So, I'm happy to answer questions if folks have it. Yeah, Nicola.
Well, does it make sense in this context to have single runner image? Because maybe if it's off topic a bit, but yeah, this was raised several times ago, but like no real results. So maybe it's, what do you think about single runner image? So that would make it way easier to whole pipeline, so we are not, fixing a dozen of images here and there, and instead we have only one image. It would be big, but it would be cached and run.
I agree. Having a single runner image would have made things much simpler for me, most likely. I briefly considered trying to change the attribute utils into a variant of that single runner image that we could use, but I decided not to do that for this because I didn't, or I wanted to try and work on this faster than I would have been able to by making that change. So, and that ADR for the single runner image, it's effectively in an implementable state. It can be implemented. It's accepted that this is something that would be beneficial for us to potentially do, but it's just not something that has been done.
I don't think that we would actually be able to get the sort of single change update on the runner image that we think we would get anyway. Like, if you imagine all the individual images we have now, unless we're literally talking about consolidating the build for all these different utilities into one image, like some of these we build from source, right? Then we're still going to have like first level builds that have to produce something that then get aggregated into that final one. And we would still have to go around and update the build pipelines for all those first level builds of things like Auris and YQ to handle ARM.
Nicola?
Yes, okay. So it could be a problem, right? But we can have at least single runner image per pipeline, like different image for build, different image for integration, different image for release, for example. Regarding building multiple images as basis, well, what if we would use multi-stage build? So we build something from source in a separate stage, so it would be one long build. Does it make sense?
Personally, I think that it's not as good as having individual builds so that we can update the consolidated thing atomically, like where we just pin to like a version of it or whatever. But I don't know, like both work, but I don't know why we wouldn't just continue the kind of pattern where we build the individual things and then sort of have like some block file that we update on release of, we build a new version of Auris and it kicks the lock file of the consolidated thing. We might need it in multiple runner images, like we might need it for integration service and build, so we could kick both of them. And then that lock file updates and like rebuilds that image, consolidating those two.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. It sounds better.
I think I agree too. The only reason to consider a really monolithic build would be to make the thing that Andrew's trying to do easier. There's only one place to go to update for a new architecture or to change something about all the content. But I think the maintainability of a kind of like tree of dependencies for images is probably going to end up being better and faster. It'll be a less fragile build in the end if you're not having to rebuild every single one of those small pieces from source every time.
Yeah. I think this is the first time we've actually had this problem, so we probably won't have it too many times.
Yeah.
And then once all the images get built, essentially every single task is going to be bumped to incorporate one of these new images, these new multi-arch step images. And so everybody who's already onboarded is going to get new task definitions pushed out. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way that it works. So.
Time check. Any other comments or questions on this topic? And if not, let's move to the next one. Andrew, on creating snapshots outside integration service.
Yeah. So I was talking about this with Louis last week, but he's not on the call to support or refute what I'm saying. But one of the things that we've kind of seen with usage of these Konflux pipelines is that users have some challenges when they're trying to coordinate the snapshots that are being built. Maybe that's for OLM bundles where you have all your pin related images and you really need to have the snapshot have consistent pinned image digests between your related images and those components that are in the snapshot, so that you can make sure you release it together. That's also needed for our conformer checks, for example. Or with single component mode, that's something that we kind of invented and threw into integration, threw into release, where you have a snapshot, but that snapshot isn't really meant for everything to be released on its own. Instead, or is not meant for everything to be released together. Instead, it's an organization scheme where everything is released, tested and released individually. That kind of also feeds into the application component rework model. But what we had thought about was a possibility. I know it's been discussed in the past. We can create snapshots within a task or within a build pipeline, but there's no value in doing that necessarily because it's hard to differentiate the snapshot that you create versus the snapshot that integration service creates. And so we had this idea: what if we create a snapshot in the build pipeline, and the build pipeline knows what you have a task in the build pipeline that knows what the component that it built was, and it can create an appropriate snapshot. Then if you're building a Helm chart, you create a snapshot that has all of the images that are needed for that Helm chart, and you can release it as a whole thing. You build a bundle, same thing. You can build the snapshot that has all the images you need and it releases the whole thing. Or you have a component that's just this component on its own. You create a snapshot that only has one image. And you tell integration service, don't build a snapshot for me. And instead, integration service can see a result, a pipeline result, that the snapshot was built, and augment it with additional metadata to then continue the whole process in an uninterrupted flow. I talked about this a little bit with Ryan and others, and I think that this actually is supportive of any kind of upstreaming work that we're doing and any kind of removing dependencies between services as well. Because then the build service doesn't need to know about this. This is really a user intent, and the pipeline that a user chooses has all the knowledge about the intent. And so you can then use it to trigger certain tests or certain releases based on the context of this was built from a single component. So there is a draft PR I tossed up just to kind of help illustrate this. The feedback from the team was that they wanted to do it a different way, which is fine. I did take the feedback they gave me, and I'm going to just push up another change to that PR as well. But yeah, so I wanted to bring this topic to the call just to see how folks are feeling about it. Ryan, I think one of the things Ryan was saying is that we need to definitely be careful about increasing what we're supporting, especially if we're looking at test subject constructors and with application component rework. But if we roll this out as kind of an alpha thing to see how users feel about it, how it works, what issues it causes, what issues it solves, that might be the best way to start it. So, Ralph?
One of my maybe first reactions to it is that I think the way the PR was done, and maybe this is some of what the Ryan and others were thinking of doing differently. What if it was an attribute of the group or the application in our current API group in the future API, where you could turn off snapshot creation for that group or for that application, and then whether or not the build pipeline is creating a snapshot or not is besides the point. Something will create the snapshot. That's just not integration service, which you've disabled explicitly. It would help us conserve on result size, because the build pipeline wouldn't have to hint to integration service to not create the snapshot by not emitting a result. Could allow other things to create the snapshot, like not integration service. It could be, imagine a Jenkins pipeline is somehow interacting with a build pipeline and then creates the snapshot without having to have the build pipeline in place.
So, I mean, just one, I know Ryan probably wants to respond to that. Where the hinting comes in, it doesn't really matter. Like, you can have the hinting come in from a pipeline result. We're not hitting, I don't think that we hit result size issues on the pipeline, but the thought that I had as well was we wouldn't return the snapshot in the result. We would create the snapshot in a task and return the name of that snapshot in a result. So and any size issues are irrelevant. And then you would hint to the integration service, here's a snapshot, but don't process it yet until you get the message to process it from some other signal. So then it's essentially irrelevant how that snapshot's created. The important part is you can create snapshots which you're deferring processing on, and then so I'll leave it there. Ryan, I don't know if you wanted to comment on what Ralph said.
Yeah, so I had a couple thoughts on the adding a field to the application or component group CR. There's two reasons I don't want to pursue that. The first is there was some talk at one point, and I don't know if it's something we'll pursue. It seems like it's a big maybe, about having snapshots be OCI artifacts that are stored in Quay, and the snapshot CR is basically just a pointer up to that Quay object. This would fit really, really well with creating snapshots in the build pipeline. Build pipeline creates this Quay artifact and just says in the results, this is where the snapshot is. But if we move to that model rather than creating something in the cluster, we do need a way of telling the integration service where that snapshot lives. The other reason is I don't think that in the long term we should be creating snapshots both in the, or not both, but either in the integration service or in the build pipelines. I think we should choose which model we want to pursue. User pain using this methodology, and then we can kind of look at things in, say, a quarter and say, do we want to move everyone over to build pipeline snapshot creation, or do we want to pursue another way of fixing these issues? But I think in the long term, we're going to create some problems by having snapshots potentially being created in different places. And so, sorry, to tie that back to my original point, I don't think it makes sense to add an attribute to the CR, because I think it's something that we're not going to necessarily need long-term or want long-term.
Thank you. Mikla, I think you're next.
Well, Andrew, do you mean by the task and build pipelines that users would be constructing snapshots themselves with a custom logic, or you mean that it would be predefined task by Konflux teams and users would just specify some parameter which kind of snapshots they want?
There would essentially not be any requirements, or people would be free to create snapshots however they want. Their users would certainly benefit from certain tooling to assist in that. The comment was raised that maybe there would be certain tasks that are capable of creating certain types of snapshots. One of this PR is gigantic that I'm about to share, but let me as an example, I have a PR open to add this bundle tool to our operator SDK builder, which helps to do some things like pin related images and even doing remapping to potentially decouple build and release as well, because we have that dependency between build and release for the component nudging. But you can use the same type of tool within a task to take a bundle image and generate a snapshot from it. So it would not be coupling between services necessarily, but it would be one service might publish a task or might have some tasks that help you generate the appropriate metadata or the appropriate resources to be able to integrate with the next task. So like before, we've talked about coupling between build and release tasks. If you want to build a certain artifact, well, maybe you just need to have a task that's capable of releasing that artifact. It has a same or a similar model where you have tasks to help manage the integration between different services.
Well, I'm still not sure that it's responsibility of build pipeline to create the snapshot. Maybe we would need something separate in between build and integration that would do it.
But like if you're producing an operator bundle, and like it's not necessarily the responsibility of the build service definitely isn't involved here at all, but you're creating an operator bundle and you want to create then want to integrate the operator bundle with the other processes, with the other controllers and the other parts of Konflux. So the operator bundle is essentially in charge of saying, I'm an operator bundle. I know what it means for me to be released. Here's the resource that's needed to integrate with the next step within Konflux in order to be able to release me.
Well, if we give that freedom to create snapshots to users completely, that would expand possibilities, but also would increase mistakes users do, especially new users. So I'm not sure.
It would change. It would certainly change the. If we want to simplify it, then we would definitely want to have a out-of-the-box pipeline for bundle images. So at some point in time in the past, we said, we're not going to create a special pipeline for bundle images because they're just container images that can have the same thing. But then we would have a pipeline that people can choose. This is a bundle image. This is a Helm chart that I'm producing. And then within that, we can slip in the task that's responsible for generating the snapshot as well. So like at one level, it complicates things, but having all these tasks today is a lot of overhead that many users don't actually comprehend. So from the sense of this is a black box today, it's a black box tomorrow, there's no additional complication, but we're actually able to improve the contextual awareness that what am I building? I'm not just building an image, I'm building a bundle image, and that has special meaning.
Well, but to create a snapshot, user need to know about different parts of the application. For example, if I'm building an operator, then it needs to be part of the bundle. We should have reference to the operator image in the operator bundle, for example. And then build pipeline or whatever stuff would create a snapshot should know about bundles, so what's around it and how to construct that relation. I'm not sure that it's responsibility of build pipeline, because build pipeline just builds stuff. So it takes source, it produces artifact from the source. And then how these artifacts are combined together, it's completely different question. I don't think that we should do it in build. As I said, we can have it in the middle between build and integration, but it should be something else.
I see Ryan's hand. Ryan.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on the discussion. The first is that I agree with Andrew. We probably want to have some default snapshot creation tasks. Maybe one that works how snapshot creation works today. Maybe one that is equivalent to single component mode, where it has just one component in the snapshot. That way, we make things as easy as possible for users to adopt the new model. I think we're also going to need to consider if giving users unlimited control over how their snapshots are created creates security issues, right? If a user can create a snapshot that has some arbitrary image in it, and then they can deploy that snapshot onto our test clusters, is that a problem? Should we be, at least maybe this is a discussion for the internal call, but should we be kind of locking down the tasks that we at Red Hat trust users to use, and enforcing that in Conforma? And then the last thing I wanted to say is, Mikola, to your point about doing the snapshot creation separately, I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea to have the integration service run a pipeline to create the snapshot when the build pipeline finishes. One of the advantages of Andrew's proposal is that this does decrease the extent to which the integration service has to watch pipeline runs and has to know what is going on in the build service. So I think we should weigh that as well. I don't think it's completely outside of the scope of build to say you're going to build a component and then you're going to build the metadata structure that the component will be tested in.
I think we need to wrap up this point and move on to the next one. I know Brian and Adam want to talk about another one. Andrew, I see your hand. Do you want to give some closing comments and point us to where we should continue the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we can continue having this conversation. Well, reach out to me and we'll find a place to have it. I think one other thing that I just wanted to mention is, Mikola, you're saying that you need to understand how components, applications, and have this metadata. Like one of the key pieces of this is the snapshots don't need to have any relationship to a single application. The relationship from a snapshot to an application is there to help us decide how to release it, because the application is tied to the release plan and to the release. But you can have components that are built outside of an application in a snapshot. And then that's in the as long as it's in the release plan and mission, those components are there. Release service doesn't actually have any knowledge about application. And so it kind of takes this view that we have and it allows you to arbitrarily, as a user, define how you want these builds to happen, define how you want these things to be grouped from a build perspective, and then be released. And I'm sorry, it wasn't a closing comment because there's many questions that are raised. But yeah.
I'll try to be quick. So my main point was not about relation to application or component. My point was that build pipelines that build single artifact should be forced in this design to know about relations of this produced artifact, which looks wrong to me. Because we produce an artifact. What happens to it after build, it's separate question. So that was my point.
Cool. Andrew, again, where should we look to continue the conversation?
I'll start a thread internally for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. That works. Thank you. Adam, Brian, if you're ready, we got that last point on the doc to talk about build definitions PR 2574 and a proposal on merge queues.
Yeah, so I opened a pull request to attempt to reuse artifacts from pull request pipelines because, especially when you have a very long pipeline, you can wait an hour or maybe 2 hours or 3 hours in some of our users' cases for a pull request pipeline to finish. And then, assuming you get all your checks passed, your reward is you get to click merge and wait another 3 hours for the merge pipeline to run, and you cross your fingers and hope everything works. This is, for some of our users, a really bad experience and takes longer than their current workflow, which is not good. We want to be improving the current workflow. And, there are some objections to the PR that I have. And before trying to address them, Adam had a different idea about using merge queues to maybe make push pipelines unnecessary. So I wanted to have him discuss that.
Right. I think I'll need to introduce a bit more about how the reuse feature was supposed to work. So the basic idea was you open the pull request, it runs a build, then you merge it, and then there's a bunch of criteria for deciding whether the PR build is or isn't reusable. But the main one is comparing the entire source code, like ignoring the Git metadata, but otherwise the entire source code has to be the same, and then the build can be reused. And then there's a bunch of other criteria, which would mean that between the time when you submit the pull request and when you merge it, nothing else can be merged to main. Otherwise, the build will not get reused, because the source code before the merge and after merge wouldn't be the same. It would change during the merge. One way to ensure that you can reuse the build is to always rebase your pull request before merging, but that is counterproductive because that's just more builds. For each rebase, that's one extra build. But both GitHub and GitLab have a mechanism that does this for you. That's the merge queue for GitHub. It's called something else for GitLab. But they essentially do this rebase automatically when you click the merge button, and then if everything passes, your PR gets merged. Yeah, merge train. So the idea was, do we actually need the push build at all? If we have a merge queue pipeline that will rebase your source code on the latest state in main, this pipeline passes and your PR gets merged, can we take the image build in the merge queue and treat it as like the final image? Can we treat it as releasable and avoid needing push builds that way?
I guess I don't understand. What I don't understand is it sounds like there is a push build. Like you do a PR build, right? And you watch your checks and they, let's say they turn green. And then there's a button that says add to merge queue, right? And then you put it in the merge queue. Isn't it going to get rebuilt in the merge queue?
Yes, it is. So this
we're
would be
still rebuilding again. So we're still building twice at a minimum then, right?
We're building twice if you have both a PR pipeline and a merge queue pipeline. The idea, I think we discussed like the use cases where this feature would be the most helpful, because that is the problem that your PR still will not be reusable if you haven't rebased your pull request. So I think you said this feature would be most helpful for repos that don't really get any movement other than one mint maker PR every week. And for these repos, what I think we could do is not have a pull request pipeline at all and just have the merge queue pipeline, which would probably feel a bit weird in that you don't have any PR checks. You don't have any PR checks that start, or well, the PR checks only start when you click the merge button. But that way, you still have a check that prevents the merge. It enters the merge queue. It has to pass the build before it gets merged. But once it gets merged, that's it. That there was just the merge queue pipeline, and it's just one build.
Can I try to recharacterize it a little bit? Maybe Adam, is your proposal that we would reuse builds only for fast forward merges? And it just so happens that in GitHub, the only way you can get a fast forward merge is with a merge queue.
Basically, yes. Well, the proposal is that we wouldn't need any of the reuse logic that Brian proposed.
Right, even better, actually. Yeah.
There wouldn't be any build to reuse. We would just have one merge queue pipeline, and then the proposal is that integration service or something else that creates and evaluates snapshots would have to know that this image comes from a merge queue pipeline, which was successful, and we can release this image.
But how will conform work? It's going to be looking for attestations from a push pipeline.
Yeah, so yeah, we would need to figure out how to know that the image is not from a PR pipeline but a merge queue pipeline, and a merge queue pipeline that was successful.
I still don't understand like how it helps me. Like, say I'm building an RPM like GCC.
Mhm.
I understand that this thing takes, you know, half a day to build. So how does it help me? Like, assuming that I don't need to rebase it, right? That I have a pull request and the checks pass and I merge it. Do I still have to build it 2 times? Because just keep in mind, it's not the checks that are taking so long. It takes half a day to build GCC.
Right. So for a repo like that, I'm proposing that you don't need to have both a pull request build pipeline and a push build pipeline. You can just have one merge queue build pipeline. So you have to click the merge button first. That will trigger the build. If this build passes and the PR merges, then you already have the final image and nothing has to get rebuilt.
So would we propose to them to have some set of checks on a PR, but those checks would not include a build?
Right.
Like, there could
Yes,
still
that's
be checks that, you know, was approved by a maintainer. We could still even have, you know, potentially some, like, the team could have whatever checks they want, right? They could have Code Rabbit, or they could have like SAST or whatever they really want to have there, but we wouldn't build it. Like, we would stop short of making them build it there.
Yeah, that's the idea. And the build would still happen before the merge, but after clicking the merge button in the
Right.
merge queue.
Ralph?
In the automated Renovate case, I can imagine them setting up auto approval on this so that as soon as Renovate submits, there's essentially no CI. It approves and adds itself to the merge train. And then at that point, it gets a build and either succeeds or fails and makes its way in.
Yeah. So I think we should write this up and shop it to a couple of the teams that we have, at least, and see if they would implement such a workflow. Like, you know, it's not worth doing it if nobody's going to adopt it. But, you know, I can think of a couple, like the team that builds GCC, for example. Like, we should float it by them and say, we have an idea for optimizing the E2E time or updates to this package. Would you use this? What do you guys think?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Any other comments on this?
As a maintainer of some things, the YQ container, the ORIS container, when I get a PR for something, one of the things that when I'm reviewing a change, I sometimes, as a mental crutch, depend on the success of the build to inform what I need to bother reviewing or not. And I will no longer have that like signal at human review time.
Right.
I don't know that that's like kills this, but like that's just a fact of the way I approach reviews as a human.
But thinking about those mint maker type PRs, you know, like something that would tie up multi-arch resources for a half a day or even an hour, right? I mean, we would tie them up for half as long.
Right.
And those don't really get reviewed. Like, I don't know about you on yours, but like I maintain the Basil images and they build on all 4 architectures and they take more than 30 minutes to build and they're set to auto merge. Like, I don't review mint maker PRs, you know?
And yeah, to your point, Ralph, I understand that the setup would be limiting, like you wouldn't get the checks before the PR. But this is also not something that I would suggest everyone should use. Like, if you have a build that doesn't take a lot of time, You can still have a PR build and a merge queue build. I would say there's like two main types of repos to consider. There's repos like build definitions where we merge 1 or 2 PRs per day, where the reuse feature was never going to be that useful because by the time you merge your PR, something else has probably been merged to main. So you wouldn't have the reuse benefits anyway. And in this case, having a PR pipeline and a merge queue pipeline essentially achieves the same thing as having a PR pipeline and then a push pipeline. Because to get the benefits from reuse, you would have to do a rebase anyway. And then you're still like building 1 PR or like 2 PRs and no push versus 1 PR and 1 merge queue. Versus slow moving repos where you get 1 PR a week where you can just have the merge queue pipeline. Ralph?
There's 2 things we're trying to improve. One is about like the responsiveness of the system for particular users in particular situations. And the other is like the usage of platform-wide resources for installation, so like our limited reserve of secondary architectures. Because the merge queue version has to be selectively adopted by users, and they're going to have to invest a little bit of time, I think, to make it happen. We will be able to solve the first problem. The users who need it most can make it happen, but we won't quite solve the second problem because users for whom this is not a problem are going to continue to consume, twice as many resources as they might otherwise, and that's okay. The second thing I want to say though is that a thing I like about this merge queue proposal is that it's a cheap thing to try. You know what I mean? It's a very reversible decision. We don't have to merge a bunch of changes into the builder task, in order to figure out if it's going to work, and then we can act on feedback from that as we after we've tried it out and seen how it works for some people. Meaning return to the hash tree reuse proposal if this doesn't pan out like we would hope it would.
Yeah. I had one that makes sense, Ralph. I had one quick question. We're about out of time. Is there a way that we could document how to make the pull request build pipeline conditional on certain factors? Like, for example, Ralph, you mentioned as a reviewer liking the build, but like, could we show people how to skip/pass the build check when the submitter is mintmaker? Or other conditions, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe we could have the PR pipeline trigger on a comment. I think that's probably doable.
Big Pack has support.
Yeah, so there could be like some flexibility we could build in to say, we wouldn't run it by default, and it also wouldn't block people from adding it to the merge queue, but somebody could choose to run it, or it could be run when under certain conditions only.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess next steps, like Adam, do you want to take writing this up, or who wants to own this?
I'm not sure if I will have time to do it soon, but yeah, in the next few weeks, I think I could get to it.
I can just create a feature and we can put it on the board and mark it build.
That could work.
Someone can pick it up at some point. You want me to do that? I can do that. All right.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, guys. That gets us to the top of the hour. I'm going to close the call. Thanks, everybody, for contributing today. Good discussion.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.